Welcome to Making the Cut podcast with Chris Hill and Sean Winter, where we help you succeed in life and business by sharing principles and strategies that guide some of the most successful people in the world.
Welcome to episode 15 of the Making the Cut podcast. I'm Chris Hill with my co-host, Sean Winter. Today we have Jeff Goins. But first, Sean, what's going on with you, buddy?
It's going good. It's going good. My little girl turned 6 months this past week, man.
Already, huh?
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, so we this weekend we allocated some time. We're gonna go car shopping for her.
Yeah.
Yep. It's quick, man. Goodness gracious, it goes so quick, and her little milestones. I mean, it's crazy to see, but it's awesome, man. Things are good. Life is good. How about you?
Awesome, buddy. Yeah, things are good, man. I look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks at the National Restaurant Association show up in Chicago.
That's right.
So if anyone listening before the show, May 20th through 23rd, y'all let us know, and maybe we can link up with you. But so I'm getting ready for my talk up there, and staying busy. Recently, you launched the journal. I'm still in a holding pattern with the new book, Lead Like a Chef. My agent sent it out to publishers, and hopefully somebody will pick it up. We're still kind of waiting to hear, so that's a little bit frustrating. But aside from that, life is good, man. Life is good.
It's frustrating. What's the difference between publishers and terrorists?
I don't know where this is going, but
you can negotiate with terrorists.
That sounds about right.
You're not supposed to agree. You're not supposed to agree. You're the one that's meeting with them right now.
We'll see. Well, sounds appropriate since we have Jeff Goins in the house today.
Yeah, I'm excited to connect with Jeff. I know that when you and I connected almost a year ago now, that we had mentioned Jeff even in our interview. I've been following him for a couple of years now. He's very inspiring. He's got a bunch of little videos on YouTube that I'll catch from time to time. He's got his blog, and he writes really, really well, and he coaches really well as it relates to those trying to write. So when I was launching Entrepreneurial Chef, I actually found him and then turned to him for guidance, if you will, and it's been great. He's helped out a ton. How did you connect with him?
Yeah, I just started following his work. I think originally I connected with him on Medium, and then since then become friends, and it's been fun to watch. Last year he I guess late maybe 2015 he wrote The Art of Work, which became a national bestseller, and it's been cool to see kind of his journey and how he's really evolved as a writer and an artist. And I think one thing I want to make clear to anyone listening too is that Jeff's a writer and he does a great job, but at the same time, a lot of what I think we'll be talking about should apply to just creatives in general. So if you're a chef out there or any other form of creative type of person, be willing and open to listen to what we have to talk about, and I think it'll probably be really valuable for you.
Absolutely.
But just a quick little tidbit on Jeff. He's from Chicago originally, went to Illinois College, and then spent the next year actually traveling with a band. So a little commonality between you and him, Sean. He then moved to Nashville to follow his now wife, who had a job there. Spent the next 7 years working in nonprofits. He now writes and speaks for a living, does it full time, has an online business where he helps writers and creative entrepreneurs chase their dreams. His blog is award winning, which is goinswriter.com, Goins writer.com. It's been visited by over 4 million people from around the world. And he's got work that's been featured in the Washington Post, USA Today, Entrepreneur, Forbes, and Psychology Today. He now lives in Nashville, and they have 2 children, he and his wife. And his next book, Real Artists Don't Starve, comes out June 6th. So I think we'll probably talk a little bit about his journey, but also the new book coming out in June. So what do you say we hop in?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Jeff Goins, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here. Thanks, Chris.
Absolutely. We've been connected for a while now, and it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. We originally, Sean and I, mentioned you in our very first conversation ever, just about a year ago, when I was publishing the book. Sean had just recently launched Entrepreneurial Chef, and I mentioned how you had been really massively influential with your idea of building a bridge, not jumping. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that process of you getting started And what was the article, Sean, that you were talking about that you read earlier?
Yeah, it was on Business Insider. It was I quit my job, wrote 4 books, started making 6 figures, all without a plan, which piqued my curiosity. Because I'm a strategic guy. I always need a plan. So when I hear that someone did it without a plan, you've got me in the palm of your hand, Jeff.
Yeah, so years ago, I worked for a nonprofit organization, and I was the marketing director there. And I started out as a copywriter, which was a job that I frankly fell into. I had spent the previous year touring the country with a band, and before that, I was in college. And the only job that I had in college was as a writing tutor. I was a Spanish major. But I'd always written, and so to make a little bit of money on the side, I helped other students with their papers and learned a lot about writing through that process. As you guys know, the best way to be a student is to teach. And so this guy hired me for this job. He said, "Oh, you're a writer." Looked at my resume, which wasn't much to look at when I was a year out of college after touring with the band for a year. He goes, "Oh, you're a writer." And I was like, "I am." And he saw that, like when you're 23, right? You put every possible achievement you've ever accomplished on your resume, including a writing tutor for 4 years, And I go, "Okay, I guess I am." And so I started working at this nonprofit. I basically did whatever my boss asked me to do. Even if I wasn't good at it, I would say yes, and I'd go figure out how to do it. It was, now that I look back on it, a season of apprenticeship. And I think most first and sometimes second and third jobs are apprenticeships, which means you're doing work that you don't necessarily love. But if you do it right with the attitude of a student, you can acquire skills that you can use elsewhere. Anyway, around this time, I'm working for a nonprofit. My boss is just throwing books at me left and right. One of the things that I learned from him, because he had his MBA and he was this entrepreneurially minded guy, and he was running a nonprofit and he was a really smart businessman, is he was always reading books and recommending books. And so I just started reading business books because I was interested in business and marketing and all these things about how I could do my job at that time as a marketing director better. And at some point I read that book by Jason Fried from Basecamp, Rework. And in that book, he says, plans are guesses. Plans are guesses. And I read that and I was like, this is so true. Because I'd written marketing plans and, business plans for, parts of the organization. And all of my best plans in the world were guesses. They were hopes of what I thought to accomplish. And so, I did all this stuff not because I planned on doing it, but because I had a vision. I had an idea of what I wanted my life to look like. And so, several years into this job as a marketing director, about 5 years into it, I was like, okay, this is the 5-year mark. This is good. I was in my late 20s. I was now married. I could see 30 kind of peeking over the horizon, and I was going, what do I want to do for the next 10 to 15 years? Because I kind of understood that as like, my career. What do I want my career to be about? So that when I hit middle age, I'm hitting my stride, not going, I got to start all over. I missed it. And so I was sort of anticipating a middle age crisis. And I realized, okay, this isn't it. This is good. I learned a lot. This is not where I want to be for the next 10 or 20 years. And what I realized was not just that I wanted to be a writer, but that I already was a writer. And I love what Parker Palmer says about this. He says, before I can tell my life what I want to do with it, I need to listen to my life telling me who I am. And so at 27 years old, I started listening to my life, and it told me, and it told me that I was a writer. And I go back and look at, writing tutor, won the 6th grade spelling bee when I was 8 years old, going on road trips with my parents. My mom would read me the dictionary, and all these things started to add up. And I realized, okay, this is something that I'm supposed to do. It felt like a calling to me. And then, all that stuff that you mentioned, Sean, happens in about 18 months after that decision to become a writer, to become who I already was. And it wasn't a plan. It didn't happen on accident, but I didn't plan every step of it. And the way it happened was much better than I could have imagined.
To go to the time period when you made the decision, you started taking some action toward what you wanted to do, what were some of those steps on maybe a granular level? What did that look like? Was it dialing in your routine? Was it, coming up with a schedule of writing, or what kind of caused that traction?
Yeah, so I believe that activity follows identity, that before you can go do something, you have to become someone. And this is, I think, a little counterintuitive these days, where it's all about the hustle, all about the work. But for me, it was really important as a creative, as somebody who was plagued with insecurity. I wasn't going to go write if I didn't believe I was a writer. And I had a conversation with a friend around this time where I'm thinking, this is something that maybe I want to dabble in. And I had joined this coaching program that my boss actually paid for me to be a part of, because he was always investing in personal growth opportunities. He would buy me books. If I want to go to a conference or something, he would typically say yes. And so this is something that he said yes to. And so I'm in this coaching program that my boss paid for, and this guy asks me what my dream is. And I said, well, I don't know. I don't think I have one of those. And he just looked at me, and I'd been in the coaching program for about 2 months. And the guy's name was Paul. He was not the coach. He was another one of the students like me. And he looked at me and he said, oh, that's funny, because knowing you, I would have guessed that your dream was to be a writer. And it was, that hit me so hard, because it was kind of amazing that somebody saw something in me that I really wanted to be true, but was too afraid to admit it. And without my saying anything, he could just see it. It was obvious to him. And I said, well, I guess I'd like to be a writer someday. And he said, Jeff, you don't have to want to be a writer. You are a writer. You just need to write. And that was the permission, I guess, I was waiting for. And so the next day I got up and I started writing. I started a blog. That was, one thing that I did. I started writing on it every single day, because I had read in a blog post, Seth Godin said, nobody ever gets talker's block like they get writer's block. So write like you talk. Do it every day and do it in public. And I was like, oh, practice in public. I can do that. And so I started blogging every day, and I did that for a year. And then I started learning about marketing and how I could build a platform and just find ways to take the things that I was writing about and use them to help other people. And I would say, looking back, those 3 things: first of all, calling myself a writer, believing that I already was this thing that I wanted to be. And then 2, committing to the daily work, starting a blog and practicing on it every day. And then 3, finding ways to market that work. And for me, that meant writing blog posts and articles on other people's websites, and just linking back to my website, guest posting. And those 3 things allowed me to grow an audience of over 100,000 people. And I did that for about a year. And the next year, I figured out how to monetize it and turn it into a business, which allowed me to publish books and teach online courses. And within 2 years of that conversation, you are a writer. You just need to write. I had quit my job and was a full-time writer.
Wow, that's
very cool. And Jeff, I'm trying to remember the chronology here. So you, like myself, have had several, we'll just call them failed blogs, or you started a blog and it didn't quite work. 4 or 5 or 6, right? Where are those in the timeline? Those are before all this.
I thought you were going to say, where are those? Which is like, they're still on the internet. People are like,
mine
I love
are painful.
Yeah, people are like, I'd love to read it. I was like, you could find them. Like, that's the thing about bad work, is it kind of gets buried by everything else. And so people are so afraid of failure without realizing, like, you can go find my failures. They're out there. I didn't try to hide them. I didn't delete them. They're still out there. The problem is, like, or the reality is, when you fail, people don't really notice as much as we are afraid that they will. And people remember the successes. They tend to forget the failures. So in the chronology, where is that? That preceded all this stuff. So throughout most of my 20s, I was dabbling with blogging. And I was hired by this nonprofit organization initially to help them, help write copy and then teach their staff and volunteers. It was a mission organization, so they were doing service projects all over the world. And so I was teaching literally thousands of people every year how to blog. I didn't know how to blog. So I started a blog, and so a lot of my job involved blogging. It was a way that we got a lot of free traffic to our website, which we then converted into volunteers for our projects, and then also, use that as a means of marketing for fundraising for the organization. So I kind of got this education in online marketing. And during this time, I'm learning about blogging. I had a blog because our whole staff was required to blog. You were given a blog. I don't know that you were required, but it was encouraged. And so I was like, well, what if I could start another? I was watching people on the internet, launch these blogs and become published authors. And this was always a thing in the back of my mind where I was like, I wonder if I could do this. And so I'd start a blog. I'd get an idea in the shower. I'd start it. And 6 weeks later, I'd get bored or distracted, and it would kind of fall to the wayside, and I'd get a handful of readers and then abandon it. And this happened, I think it happened 7 or 8 different times. And then when I started goinswriter.com, it was the opposite of a niche website. Everybody says niche down. I had done that, and I could never find a niche that worked. And so I was like, this is just going to be me. I'm just going to write about stuff. And it's going to be, my musings on life. And I'm going to spend the next 2 years writing on this website before I quit. And so when I started goinswriter.com at the end of 2010, I was like, I'm going to do this for 2 years. And if I can't get more than 250 readers, then I'll quit. And the reason that I started with, that level of commitment, I wasn't going to do it forever, but I was going to do it for a while. Is because I'd done the thing where I was like, okay, I'm going to spend 2 days on this. And if it doesn't blow up, it doesn't go viral, I'm going to quit, and the longest I'd ever blogged on something was like, 6 months maybe. And I just wasn't really pleased with the results of those efforts. And I was like, okay, what's the variable here? The variable here is my commitment. I'm going to commit longer. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to do better. And I was just so frustrated of failing that I was like, okay, I'm tired of going around and around in circles. I'm going to really go for it this time.
In that process, and I think that's where maybe you came up with something that you wrote about, which was getting more followers by breaking the rules.
Yeah.
I think you might have mentioned that you kind of, quote, broke a rule by not going niche. Was that one of the rules that you potentially broke? And if not, then what were you referring to when you talked about getting more followers by breaking some of the rules?
I mean, I think of myself as a creative. Artist is this term that we throw around a lot more, and I think it's a good thing. I just wrote a book about it. I think art is always about this dance of doing what has worked before, kind of understanding where the lines are, but then testing those boundaries and those edges and coloring a little bit outside of the lines and kind of defining new boundaries. And I just knew that the artists and authors and even entrepreneurs that I looked up to were people who didn't completely follow the rules. I mean, if you want to get known for something, you've got to do something that at least looks original. And so, one of the things that I heard, and, I teach an online course for writers and I drill this into them because I think it's really important, is, I heard niche down, write about, Star Wars or, dog sweaters or whatever. And I saw that. I saw these blogs taking off because they were writing about a very specific topic. But then I saw some of them dying when that topic was no longer in vogue. And so I thought, well, if I want to be a writer, like for a living, keep in mind, like at 27 years old, all these things, like I'm thinking about my future. I'm not happy with my job. It doesn't suck, but I want something more. I'm thinking about my life up to this point, and I realize, I feel like my life is telling me I'm supposed to be a writer. This is really resonating with me, and people are starting to acknowledge and affirm this. Even people who don't know me very well. Like, I feel really strongly that this is something that I need to do. And so I'm going to do it. Like, I'm going to be a writer. So for me, that meant what do I want people to remember? And I think about my favorite authors and speakers and thought leaders. It's not that they talked about one thing. Like, we here, I think, are all friends of Seth Godin. Chris, I know you are. Sean, I can't speak for you. I'm certainly a big fan of
absolutely.
Seth. Yeah. And like what's so fascinating about him is he doesn't just write about one thing. In fact, his blog, which is one of the most popular business and marketing blogs today, talks about a lot more than just business and marketing. He talks about politics. He talks about education. He talks about philanthropy. He talks about the TSA sometimes. He talks about everything and anything. And the reason that we read Seth Godin is not because he talks about one thing or that he's an expert necessarily in a certain subject. We follow him for his worldview, which is the system is broken, but we have the tools to fix it. We can fix this thing. Whatever the system is, education, politics, business, marketing, we can fix it. It's broken, but we can fix it. He's this kind of prophetic voice in the business world. And I like that kind of writing. It really resonated with me. And I said, okay, that's the kind of writer I want to be. I want to write not for a niche audience or a topic. I want to write with a worldview. And I think this is the most powerful kind of communication, is the kind that resonates not just with the head, but with the heart, where people and you may have to go, okay, I've got a cooking blog, and we're talking about the state of the culinary industry. But I mean, you will find that there are lots of different chefs, as you guys know better than I do. And what kind of chef do you want to reach with this blog? And what is this really about? And knowing your heart, Chris, it's not just about how to cook food, right? Like, we're going to talk about how to make a life for yourself, or how to, do right by the people working in your kitchen, or whatever. And so the point is, even when you're talking about a certain subject, if you want to be a great writer, if you want to be an effective communicator, you've got to go a layer deeper and say, what's the worldview here? Because that is what really builds a tribe. That's what builds a dedicated audience. And this is the thing when I was starting my blog that I kept hearing in the blogosphere is niche down, niche down, niche down, pick a topic. And I was like, that's boring. And what if today everybody's talking about dog sweaters, but 3 years from now, nobody cares about dog sweaters, or my dog dies and I don't want to talk about that anymore. That's traumatic for me. I appreciate you guys laughing at the death of my dog. It's a little morbid. I realized, okay, this is not a quick way to make some cash or whatever. I'm trying to build a career here, and I want people to know my name and know my voice for the next 25 or 50 years. And so what do I want that to be? Like dogsweaterknitter.com or Jeff Goins? And so, that's why I went in that direction. And yeah, that was a rule at the time that I was breaking.
I'm sorry. I had to mute it because I was cracking up with the dogsweaterknitter.com.
I always use that example. Because I talk to writers and they go,
love it.
Well, nobody will read what I write. I'm like, look, go to Google and search dog. Like say you've got something like how to knit dog sweaters, right? Like you've got a blog about super niche thing. Go Google that right now, dog sweater knitting. And tell me how many responses you get. It's millions.
That's funny.
So
I love it.
Audience for anything.
That's funny. So Jeff, how do you navigate the idea of, or the tension of, originality and speaking your voice and what is important to you, while at the same time delivering what you think your audience needs and maybe want?
I love that question, Chris, because I don't think it's a good thing to pander, right? I don't think you should always tell people what they want to hear. At least that's not what, gets me up in the morning. Oh, I'm going to tell everybody something that they're going to agree with. My new book is really testament to this. Real Artists Don't Starve. That's the title, and it's getting some pushback from people who are like, well, my great aunt was a painter and she starved, So are you saying she's, not a real artist? And it's just kind of stirring up conversation. At the same time, none of us want to be, throwing messages out into the void. Like, we want people listening. Like, I don't agree with this idea that like you're writing just to write, you're creating just to create, art for art's sake, because I think that's all well and good, but don't do that's not a blog, that's a journal. So if you have a message that you want to share, like you want to do two things. One, you want to reach people, and two, you want to change them in some way. You want to transform them. You want to change their minds. You want to help them. You want to do something, whether you are teaching, entertaining, inspiring, like you want to leave your audience changed in some way. And yeah, I think this is a bit of a dance, because the first thing you have to do is earn somebody's attention, which means you have to make it about them. But I find that if you make it about them, they make it about you. And once you've earned somebody's attention, I believe that you have not only an opportunity, you have a responsibility to take them someplace that they've never been, right? So, I remember, as a kid going to camp and having camp counselors, and then, going on hikes, and the camp counselors were like trail guides, right? And I, trusted the counselor because they were nice to me and took care of me, and I believed them. And when we were out on the trail, at summer camp, they were leading me someplace that I'd never been before. But I was following them because I trusted them. And I think the same thing is true with an audience. Your first job is to earn their attention by delivering a message that is valuable and helpful to them. And then second, I think you need to take them someplace that they've never been before. I mean, all the great stories, all the great books, all the great songs do this, right? Like if it's too weird, you're like, well, this is this is too unfamiliar. Food is this way too, right? Like you have to start with something kind of familiar. This is what I love about, at least, the food scene here in Nashville, is it's all kind of familiar Southern comfort food, fused with something surprising. You're sitting down and you're eating, chicken and waffles or something, and they, have some kale in there. So I don't know, because you got to have kale in everything these days. But there's something familiar and then something surprising, and the combination of those two things means that people kind of know what to expect, but then you're keeping their interest by throwing them a curveball.
And now, for the creative individuals that are pursuing their passion and they're working to build a business around it, how do they keep that fire going and not burn out?
So, I don't believe, and this is kind of a paraphrase of a Walt Disney quote. He said, "We don't make movies to make money. We make money to make more movies." And he was responding to a critic, somebody who had written him a letter and said, "It's all about the money." And this is at a time when Disney was really starting to blow up. And, Walt said, no, that's not what it's about. The money is a means to making more art. And I just had lunch with an entrepreneur, a friend of mine. And we were talking about kind of this challenge of starting a business, growing a business, scaling a business. Like, why do you do these things, especially as a creative, when running a business takes time and effort and energy away from, say, focusing on your art? I could write more books if I weren't running a business. For me, there's a couple of things that kind of keep the fire in me. First of all, it's understanding that money is the means, never the master. So I'm not working for the money. I'm not working to serve the bottom line. At the same time, I'm not demonizing it, because if I run out of money, then I've got to go, I can't make more art. I've got to go, get a job somewhere. And I actually disagree with kind of this conventional wisdom that you should just do your art on the side, because then if you don't do that, you'll lose the passion for it. I don't think that's always necessarily the case. I think you can do that. Chris, I know that's, a little bit of, you've got some of that in your story. But for me, the way that I think about this is the business is a means to create more art. And there was a time not too long ago where the business that I started that was supposed to make me money so I could spend my time writing books, not worrying about, living paycheck to paycheck and worrying about how good the books would sell. There was a time where I was working for the business and I wasn't writing anymore. And a friend called me on it. And he said, it's funny that you started this business so that you could write books, and now you're writing less than you ever have. And that was a wake-up call to me. So I think, you have to have it in proper perspective. Why am I doing this? What am I doing this for? And then, second, create systems, build infrastructure. Today, I'm writing more than I ever have because I realized what kind of business I want to have that will allow me to have the most amount of freedom, help the most people, and do my best creative work. And I knew, on one extreme, it was okay, I don't want to be Apple, I don't want to have this, I don't want to be a CEO and have this huge company and have, hundreds of thousands of people working for me and having all that pressure. And at the same time, I don't want to be a freelancer where I'm, burning the candle at both ends just to kind of keep things going, even if the money's good. And so for me, that meant having a small team, collaborating with other like-minded people, small enough that I could manage it myself so that I felt like I had, creative control, but I have people doing stuff for me. So I have flexibility to, write a book, spend 11 months writing a book like I did last year, or take off for the afternoon and do an interview like this, or take my family to the zoo, or, whatever. And so for me, it was about really understanding why I was making the money in the first place and how it was a means to making more of the art, which is for me writing. And then at the same time, figuring out how to use the thing that I've built to actually provide a system and a means, for me to do more of that work and not just continue to build and grow the system itself.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When you published your first book, how did that change your writing process? Or are you more strategic now, or maybe just strategic in a different way now than you were before?
Yeah, I think so. You mean in regards to writing or just across the board?
Yeah, I guess, looking at it as a career and along those lines.
I mean, I think you write your first book to see if you can do it, right? Like that's why I was doing it. Can I actually do it? There's this story about one of the first guys to attempt to climb Everest, a guy named George Mallory, who ends up, getting to almost the peak and then he disappears, and people still don't know if he was the first person to climb Everest or not. And they asked George Mallory and his crew, why are you doing this? Why are you trying to climb Mount Everest? And he says, because it's there. Because it's there. And like that resonates with every ambitious bone in my body. Why try to do anything? Why try to write a book? Because I want to see if I can. And so I could, and it came out okay, and people read it and liked it. And I realized for me, writing is, one part creating something that's really fun for me. But then it's also one part, the other part is seeing it resonate with somebody. And so my first book did pretty well. Second book did even better. And then the third book I wrote for myself. I was like, I'm going to write the best book possible. I wrote a memoir called The In-Between. And I was like, I don't need to market it. I don't need, I'm just going to write it, And it kind of flopped, and to this day, I'm still really proud of that book. I think it's a great book. It's really well written. But, Stephen King says, write the first draft with the door closed and the second draft with the door open. I never opened the door. I kept that thing close to my heart, and then it was time to publish it. And I wasn't really thinking, beyond that. And so you asked about being strategic, Chris. By the time I got to my fourth book, The Art of Work, I was like, okay, what was disappointing about that? What was fun about the first two? Like, what kind of writer do I want to be? And I wish I could just say, man, I just love to write. And I do, but I love to write stuff that I think people are going to read, and it's going to connect with them and transform them in some way. And so writing for me is about writing something that's true and something that I believe in. And then it's also about getting it in front of somebody and going, what did you think? And that's a dance, again, I don't want to pander, and I don't want to just do something just for myself. But when I wrote The Art of Work, I was going, okay, how can I write a book that I believe in and that resonates with me, but also find a way to get this to resonate with other people, help them, and maybe change their minds about, their life's work in some way. And by that time, which was 2015, a few years into this, I realized this is what I enjoy most: creating stuff that I feel qualitatively is good. It's artistic. It's creative. But having all of these on-ramps to this idea, so that it can resonate with other people. Basically, writing something that I know is probably going to transform somebody else. It's going to sell well, and it's marketable, and it's something that I believe in. And that's more art than science. It took me a while to figure out that was something I was even interested in. And I think, creatives, so often we go, oh, it's all about the art, man. It's all about the food or the writing or whatever. And And I think that's fine if like you're okay with not making a living off of this and you don't care about the commercial side about it whatsoever. But just understand that you're talking about a hobby, not a profession, not a vocation. And I would say that stuff because I thought that's what I was supposed to say. And then I would create something like a book and it wouldn't sell. And I was really disappointed. And I was like, am I being honest here? Or do I really want to create stuff that sells? And is that necessarily a bad or unartistic thing to want? And the conclusion that I came to was not necessarily, and again, so I think there is a way to create really good art that also sells really well without selling out.
Yeah. And I think that as you build an audience, as that grows, like yourself, I've experienced, similar growth with my audience, the last year and a half or so. You start to pay attention to the feedback that's coming in. You hear from more people just because there's more people paying attention. So then you start directing your attention more to those types of ideas as well. So that kind of steers you in a little bit of a direction, I think, in terms of helping you to better understand what it is you think your audience needs.
Yeah, and I mean, I tell writers all the time, what you're looking for is resonance. Finding your voice is not like you going on a mountaintop and saying, oh, like I know what my message is. I know what my purpose in life is. Finding your voice is a trial and error process of putting things out into the world, what I call practicing in public, and then seeing what resonates. And when you get feedback, people go, hey, this resonates with me. And it resonates with you and it resonates with them. Then you've got resonance. You've got something really good that you can build upon. And I think we get in trouble when we are just doing what the public wants, right? Or we're doing just what we want. We're doing work that we think is relevant, but it's not resonating with anybody else. You guys saw that movie Chef, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good picture of like this guy. He's gone too far on the commercial side. He's just doing what the audience wants. He hates his life. But it's paying pretty well, and he gets the art critic basically blasts him on Twitter, and he agrees with them, but it makes him mad because it reveals that he's being untrue to himself. And so what does he do? He gets a food truck and drives around the country and ends up creating this new line of food. What is he doing? I mean, really, he's reconnecting with his voice. He's refining his voice, which is here's what resonates with me. And it's exciting, not because he's like in a food truck by himself making tacos, like it's exciting because there's a big long line of people. And so I think for all of us, there is this work that we need to be true to, and there's an audience waiting for it.
As individuals start finding some of that success, it starts sometimes with a lot of people filling up an ego. And do you see in some of the people either that you coach or in some of some of maybe some peers or just examples where having an ego maybe helps their cause as being a creative and then also even hurts potentially? Or even for yourself, have you kind of struggled with that dance of when to maybe tailor it down or build it up?
I have struggled with that. I do struggle with that. I would say the best solution for that is to get married. My wife is always reminding me, get a partner, get somebody to go, dude, you are not that big of a deal. You're just not. Somebody added me to Wikipedia the other day, and I was like, and I showed my wife, I was like, look, I'm legit now. She's like, anybody can put anything on there. It's not that big. She goes, that stuff isn't even true. It says you were born in 1982. You're born in 1983.
Jeff, you're welcome, by the way, and I'll make that fix.
Yeah, like I said, anybody. So I agree with my friend Ryan Holiday that ego is the enemy. I think the reality is ego is so tempting because in the short term, I think it does work. It does help, as you said, Sean. Having a big head and being confident can, on a short-term basis, command respect. And people go, oh, I guess he or she is a big deal and I should treat them this way. But I just find that there's always a bigger fish. There's always a bigger feat. And, even when you think you're a rock star, there's somebody who has no idea who you are. And, the bigger the ego, the harder the fall. And I just find that it's much better to maneuver through life thinking that you're less of a big deal than other people think you are. And I don't think, like, we've all seen false humility, right? Which is just like another version of pride, where people are like arguing with you. Oh, I'm not that big of a deal, and they just keep like talking down, and they're like, well, you're kind of a big deal. So why are you fighting this so hard? And all they're doing is bringing more attention to themselves. And everybody's like, wow, look how humble they are. I don't like that. I think that's disingenuous. When I think of humility, I think of two people. One, my friend Mary, who's the most amazing piano player I've ever met. She played piano at our wedding. She's incredible, like Ben Folds kind of incredible. And she grew up playing piano in her church. And, that's exactly kind of the setting where somebody's like, oh, you're so good. And she's like, no, it's all Jesus. But like, that wasn't true. She's like, I practiced, and I think this is a gift, but I practiced really hard. And so people would come up to her and they would say, great job. That was amazing, Mary. You're so talented. How do you do it? And she would look at them and she would smile and she would say, thank you. And that was it. And, she was bringing as little attention as she could. Because, like when somebody comes up to you and compliments you, the wrong thing to do is basically like put them down and go, you don't know what you're talking about. I really suck. You just have bad taste, right? Like that's not helpful and that's not humble. And at the same time, you don't want to go, you're right. Yeah, I am pretty amazing. Let's talk more about that. When I think of humility, I think of Mary. She goes, thank you. The other thing I think of is recently, not too long ago, I was at a pub in Franklin, Tennessee, just outside of Nashville. And it's a tiny little Irish pub where people go and drink pints, in the afternoon. And I'm there with my laptop working. And there's like 8 people in this little hole in the wall pub in Franklin. And in walks Taylor Swift. She walks in. It's very clear that this is Taylor Swift. She's got one of her boys with her, not any of the Taylors. And she looks around, and all the seats are taken, and turns around and walks out. And as she's walking out, this guy's like, wait, you can sit here. And he like clears, off his table and comes and sits next to me and lets her have a seat. And she just kind of comes in, eats her food, and leaves. No big deal. I don't know if you guys have experienced this. I've experienced this where a friend who's like a blogger or like a B+ musician, goes into some place, a conference, a coffee shop, something, and like they're a big deal, in that space, and they're kind of got the swagger, and they just think they're it, and they're just not. It's kind of off-putting. It's like they don't realize how big of a world it is and how small of a niche that this is. And I just go, okay, like here's Taylor Swift. Like she's like legitimately a huge, mega, major pop star around the world. And she walks in and goes, oh, there's no seats. I'll just go somewhere else. And so, I mean, I think I think that's the kind of humility plus hard work that leads to long-term success versus the, big egomaniac who says, yeah, you're right, I am a big deal. We don't tend to see those people stick around very long.
Right. And I feel like a lot of those types of people are based on the way they're communicating, thinking about themselves versus the audience that they're trying to serve.
Yeah. I mean, you're right, Chris. Like, what got you here? Typically what got you here was serving people, being selfless, yes, working hard, but it was about not making it about yourself. Whether you're writing songs, cooking food, making art, writing blog posts, you're trying to find a way to make it about them. What do? They make it all about you. And if you don't return that gift, if you don't give it back to them, go, no, let's make it about you. Let me share this platform. Let me try to help you in some other way. And you go, yeah, you're right. It is about me. You start to decline. You start to, steadily go down because that's not what this is about. It's about helping people, serving them. And I mean, let's face it, most of us, basically operate out of self-interest. I don't go into a restaurant thinking, oh, like this chef is so cool and everybody thinks he's so cool and I'm here because this chef is so cool. Like I'm here, I think, because I'm hungry or I heard this food is going to blow your mind and I'm really excited about that experience, which is like it's all about me, And so we who are building platforms and trying to amass a tribe, if at any point we start to think, oh, this is really about me, we've already lost.
Yeah, it's so true. Now, your upcoming book and the ideas around the starving artist, right? And so,
yeah,
why do you think some people cling on to this? It's almost like a rite of passage sometimes to this kind of that idea of the starving artist. And then if we can kind of segue into a little bit about what that book is going to be about and how it's going to help some people.
I remember talking to you, Chris, at a Chipotle not too long ago about, how this, happens in the food industry, where, you've got chefs who basically think of themselves as artists. And so there's this challenge of, I've got to make my art, but I also have to keep the restaurant running. And this is, incidentally, this is kind of the challenge of that movie, Chef, where it's like, okay, here's what sells, but then here's what I'm, feel creatively inspired to do. And I would be lying if I didn't say there's tension there. I think for all of us, who are creatives, who are also, our art is our business, we have to dance in that tension a little bit. And again, you don't have to do that if it's just a hobby, but if you want to make a living as a creative, you have to do that dance. To answer your question, Sean, I think that the starving artist story, and I do think it is a story, it is a myth, is a myth that we believe. And like lots of myths, if you believe them, they tend to become true for you, right? Like, when I was 5 and I believed in Santa Claus, like that was reality for me. It wasn't like a story where I closed the book and go, oh, that's nice. Like I was living as if this were real. And so when we believe certain myths, they tend to come true. And this is true for the starving artist myth. If you believe that an artist has to starve, they have to struggle, what's probably going to happen? You're going to, it's going to be confirmation bias. You're going to go through life going, oh, I'm struggling, and that's because I'm supposed to, versus going, I can be successful. And I wrote this book because I stumbled across this story years ago about how Michelangelo had $50 million to his name when he died. And I was like, how could it be if art and business are on, opposite sides of the spectrum? And I mean, I think this is something that I run into a lot as a creative. There's this idea that there's like good art, and then there's commercial art, right? And commercial art sells, but you're kind of selling out. It's not that good. Well, here's a guy, Michelangelo, arguably the best artist of the Renaissance, and also, incidentally, the richest artist of the Renaissance, like 10 times richer than any of his peers. So how is it that one guy could be both the best and the wealthiest if art and business are diametrically opposed to each other? Maybe it is possible for business and art to dance together. And so I wrote this book, Real Artists Don't Starve, just to try to tell the other side of the story. We know the starving artist story. We know, like, you're not going to make any money doing this. Don't quit your day job. Good luck with that. It's just going to be a hobby. There is no money in art. We've heard all these things before. What's the other side? That's the story of the starving artist. What's the story of the thriving artist? And over the past 5-6 years of, being a full-time writer myself, I've met a bunch of other artists and creatives who are killing it. They're doing great. They're not famous. They're doing just fine. You don't know their names, but they're making a living off of their art. And it turns out a lot of them are doing a lot of the same things. They did a lot of the same things to get there. And it turns out that these things that they've done, these commonalities, are the very things that most starving artists don't do. In fact, kind of refuse to do. Things like marketing and networking and just kind of, actually charging, a considerable price for your art and understanding some of the basic business principles. And so I wrote the book, basically to say, okay, here are the rules of what it takes to be a thriving artist. If you do these things, you're more likely to succeed. If you don't do these things, you're probably going to fail. And again, just to kind of succinctly answer your question, Sean, I think the reason that we hold on to the starving artist story is just because it's familiar. And things that are familiar are hard to let go of, even if they're not true. It is easier to believe a beautiful lie than it is to accept a difficult truth.
Well said, especially for the person that is perhaps struggling to find success, and they're kind of in that period that I know Seth Godin talks about with the dip, and they're kind of maybe in that period where they don't have the success, and so they hold on to that, as you put it so eloquently, that beautiful lie that, oh, well, I'm just a starving artist right now. And that's kind of that, as you said, that confirmation bias that that's what they have to go through because that's the rite of passage, essentially.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think it's that, well, if I put my whole self out there, if if I call myself a writer and know that success is out there for myself and don't get that, then it's going to be this huge humbling experience. My ego is going to be, knocked to the ground and what's next kind of, versus being able to kind of cling to that story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I just think it's familiar. It's something that we've heard over and over and over again, and we just act as if it's true. And I just keep running into examples of people where it's like, no, I don't believe that. I think I can make a living off of my art, and they end up doing it. And so the idea of the book is you don't have to starve. So here's two paths: thriving artists, starving artists. And here's what you need to go down, one of either of these paths, like do these things if you want to thrive. If you don't want to succeed, then do these things. And I just want people to understand this is a choice. Today, with the opportunity, with the technology, this is a choice.
And it sounds like it's a lot of what you speak of in your podcast, the portfolio life, of checking out off the things that will help you to be able to do the art that you love.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And Jeff, this podcast will be coming out pretty soon. The book is coming out in June, I know. The first chapter will be available on goinswriter.com.
Yeah, you can go check out the first chapter right now. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us, buddy. It's been an absolute pleasure. Any final thoughts from you for those out there, the creatives that are looking to not be starving artists?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris, Sean. And if you want to read the first chapter of Real Artists Don't Starve, you can go to goinswriter.com/die, which is why the title of that blog post is why the myth of the starving artist must die.
Talk about your dog?
Yeah, right. My dog sweater.
Yeah,
dog sweater.
Dog sweater knitter.
Yeah, I wrapped that dog in a sweater and put him in the grave. Yeah, there's this. So when I was writing this book, I asked the art history professor, an 80-year-old guy named Rab Hatfield, who lives in Florence, Italy. And I asked him, he discovered Michelangelo's millions. This happened in 2003. He found all these unknown bank accounts that belonged to Michelangelo, and he realized this guy was really, really wealthy. And I kick off the book with the story just because I think it's so interesting. But I asked him at the end of our interview, I said, why – if this came out in 2003, I never heard of this story. I don't know if you guys never heard this before. I didn't know Michelangelo is a multi-millionaire. Did you know he's an entrepreneur and he had hundreds of employees working for him for the last 40 years of his life? It's incredible. Wow. He was literally an entrepreneur. He was living this portfolio life. He was a true Renaissance man. And I said, why haven't we heard about this story? Why do we still believe that artists have to starve and suffer for their work if this isn't true, if it doesn't have to be true? And he told me this story that I thought was so interesting. I'll just kind of, reiterate it quickly here in a summary. He said, a number of years ago, there was this community in Italy called Livorno. It's a seaside community in Italy. And their claim to fame is that they had this, artist who is from there who allegedly sculpted these sculptures, and they were so bad, the legend goes. It was Modigliani, who's a rather famous artist. He sculpted these sculptures. They weren't very good, and they said, you should just throw them in the canal. So he throws them in the canal. This is the legend, right? But nobody ever found these. And so at like the 75th anniversary, I think, of his birth, they're commemorating Modigliani, who's now dead. So this is, a few decades ago. And they go, okay, like they have this big town festival, and they go, okay, we're going to drain the canal and find these sculptures, these busts. And so they drain the canal and they find 3 of them. And the town goes crazy. This is in 1984. The town goes absolutely crazy. It attracts international, worldwide attention from the art community, all the art critics. Everybody comes up and inspects them and goes, these are legit. These are the real thing. These are true Modiglianis. And a few days later, a few college students come forward and they say, these are fake. We made these. And nobody believes them because all this attention has come, all these professionals, all these art critics who have staked their reputation that these are authentic Modigliani sculptures, like they go, no, that can't be. These are real. Like they refuse to believe the fact that these people go, no, we just made these. So on national live TV, they go, no, we made them with a Black & Decker drill in our backyard. Come follow us. We'll show you how we did it. And they did it exactly the same way again on live TV. And then they go, they still kind of refuse to believe them. They wouldn't believe it. And a little while after that, they go, okay, all right, these are fake. We realized that we were duped. And I think that's what's going on here with the starving artist story. It's like this, like, look, you don't have to starve. Here's Michelangelo. Here's hundreds of other people that I interviewed. Here's stories of artists and creatives throughout the centuries who didn't starve, who did these things, and you could do these things too. And people go, no, that can't be true. And that's why I say it's a choice, because you can present all the evidence in the world. And if you still don't want to believe it, because it's easier to believe something that's familiar to you, even if it's a lie, like that's a choice, and that's okay. And I don't have any problem with artists who are starving as long as they're not complaining about it, because there has never been a better time to be creative. Like, Chris, what you did with your Facebook page, I was watching you do it, growing your audience. I was like, this is incredible. Mm-hmm. This is a chef. Like, when has it ever been possible to do this, unless you were Julia Child, right? Like the things that 50 years ago, a fraction of a percent of people in any creative industry could do are now possible for literally anybody with an internet connection. It's amazing. So if you want to starve, that's fine. That's your prerogative. But that's a choice that you're making. You don't have to do that.
If not, go grab Jeff's book. They'll be out June. What's the date?
June 6th.
Very cool. Well, Jeff, thanks so much for joining us, buddy.
Absolutely. Been a pleasure, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It was great.
And that was our conversation with Jeff Goins. Sean, that was a blast for me. What do you think?
Oh, man, so many good points. I think one thing that he said was early on about how some people have one job or two jobs or three jobs, and that they can treat it as an apprenticeship if they want to. And it's just a mindset shift. Instead of just dreading doing something that you don't want to be doing, if you treat it as an apprenticeship, that knowing that you are learning something that's going to help you in the future, and you go in every day as a student, I think it's just such a great shift in perspective. So I think that could help a lot of people. One poignant one was activity follows identity. And I think that goes along with the act as if mentality at times, when they say act as if you own the company and walk in every day and work as though you own the company, even if you are at whatever lower level. So I think the activity follows identity was just outstanding. I think the last one was the tension between art and business. It's definitely a balancing act, and the people that can truly tap into that other side of the brain and just understand, even if it's just some basic business principles, that they're going to go a lot further. Or if they just link up with somebody that they maybe partner with. But I think that tension, a lot of people go through that. A lot of creative people go through that tension between creating the art, managing the business. And I think that's an area to look at that his book will obviously address. What about you?
Yeah, well, and just to kind of take and talk about that tension you're speaking of, with the art and the business, I think he made some really good points that I think a lot of our audience probably can really relate to as well, of the art side of it, the originality, the creative voice that you have through your writing, through your food, through whatever, and then the tension between that and wanting to make sure that you have diners, that you have readers, that you have viewers for whatever it is you're putting out to the world. I think a lot of us want to do our own thing and just have our creative voice, shine really bright and loudly, and have it just be about us. But we need to take a step back and remind ourselves that it's not really about us. It's about the people that we're here to serve, and keeping them in mind, along the way. But in addition to that, I'm looking forward to the book. And again, for anyone out there listening, you can get the first chapter of the book on Jeff's website, goinswriter.com/die. But I'm looking forward to the book. And what it entails, and really the premise of it, I think, is so powerful. Like he talked about, as we're wrapping up just now, about, the story that we tell ourselves, the story that exists for however long, and it's so ingrained in artists, quote unquote, that a lot of us just kind of cling to that as an identity versus saying, what, I can be successful doing this. And once you kind of take that approach, and almost kind of like you said, Sean, too, is take that identity and run with it and make it part of your goals and your accomplishments, then I think we're going to be much better off in the process. And with that, we'll leave you with a quote from Jeff Goins from his book, Wrecked. Struggle shapes our character, and character dictates what we'll become. Signing off until next time.